Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ash here coming at you today in Clash Royale with a very, very special video. Earlier this morning, I received this tweet from Omani Gamer. Hey Clash with Ash, I have a video idea. We, noobs, average, and above average players, ask pros questions and they answer it in a video. I think that is a fantastic idea. I reached out and to see if any pros want to come on and field your questions. I picked out 10 questions, and what do you know? We have one of the best known pros and YouTubers in the entire game. It's none other than EU CCGS champion, Surgical Goblin. Surge, how you doing, man?
What's up, Ash? I'm doing great. How are you?
That was a mouthful, man. And if I went to list all your achievements, I'd probably be here for 10 minutes. The whole video would be over by now. So thanks for coming on, man.
No problem. Happy to be here.
All right. So let's get right to the questions here. I picked 10 of them out. In just an hour, I received over 60 questions on Plex Chat and over 110 questions on Twitter. So I did my best to try to select 10 questions. We got so many great questions, but I'm trying to select 10 that were a little bit different. And I want to try to ask you tough questions too, not like, what's your favorite card? I don't want to hand you the softballs. So let's get right to it. The first question comes from Plex Chat. It's Delil64, and he says, I'll just read it verbatim. How to be noticed as an unknown or average player? So how to be noticed as an unknown or average player in the game?
To be noticed at first, I would say try to compete in tournaments or even a live event, which will be watched by many people. And then if you do well, I would say that you will automatically get noticed, or even if you have a strange deck, let's say you win a tournament, but not with 3 Musketeers, but you win it with, let's say, a bomber deck, just for example. I think many people will notice you because you're sort of unique, and I think many people like unique players, just because 3 Musketeers, everyone could win with that, or everyone could have success with that. But if you have your own sort of style, I think many people will like you and notice you as that player, as having that style.
Okay, so maybe sticking with one deck that's a little bit off meta and trying to master it?
Yeah, for example, but also in live events, for example, Godslayer, I think he was an average player, no one knew him yet, but because his, how do you say that, personality, because of his personality, everyone will remember him.
That's true.
And in game, I mean, there was a live event, but in game, I think if you have a unique playstyle, it is sort of the comparable.
Okay. And do you think having a social media presence helps, or do you think that's kind of overrated?
Yeah, definitely. Twitter, I think Twitter is the most used social media for Clash Royale. I think the community on Twitter is pretty active and also pretty big, so I definitely recommend using social media.
Okay, cool. Question number 2 from Ritwick on Plex Chat. Surgical, what do you think about the broken heal versus poison matchups? Do you think that heal should be nerfed or removed from the game?
About the matchups, I think they are, I would not say easy win for 3 Musketeers, because you could definitely win it. I've seen it happen before. But I would definitely say 3 Musketeers definitely has a big advantage in that one, and it's almost impossible to win it if you have poison. I would love to see tweaks to the heal spell, just because right now it's definitely I think you mentioned this before in many videos, rock, paper, scissors meta. That if I, for example, have a giant beatdown deck with poison and someone else is playing 3 Musketeers, I actually said this on Twitter. I think you mentioned this in your video as well, sorry. But that I said, if you see the matchups in CCGS, you could tell which player would win, and you would be right 90% out of the time. And I think that should not be possible.
Okay, so I'm going to add in my own question. I'm cheating a little bit here, so 11 questions for you. It's a follow-up, though, because you touched on something that I've been thinking a lot about, and it's when you mentioned that you could tell 90% of the time which player is going to win just based on the matchup. Now, okay, so as a non-pro, I defer to you 100%. You're way smarter than me when it comes to the game. But don't you think that 90% might be a little bit of an exaggeration? Because sometimes, some decks are definitely hard counters to other decks. But sometimes also decks are, a little bit more murky. Not everything's strictly rock, paper, scissors. So are you just talking about on specific matchups you could tell 90% of the time? Or are you just talking about in general, as soon as you saw what the players are playing, you knew who was going to win?
In this example, I mentioned CCGS, and you know that the top 8 CCS will all be professional players and really solid as well. So in my example, I would say yes, 90%, just because I think everyone practiced the matchups, everyone knows what he's doing, and then he should not make a mistake. And in the other 10%, he probably made a mistake, or the other player just played like really good or somehow won.
So do you think that you got incredibly lucky? Is that how you won? Because I respectfully disagree with you. We'll move on after this follow-up, but I just think that you are an incredibly good player and you could overcome a lot of those disadvantages. You disagree? You think it's just incredibly rock, paper, scissors?
To be honest, like for me, I would say not to be like bragging or selfish, but I think I'm on a different level, and I think only like 3 or 4 people in the entire game are on my level. And I would not say like I can always be the hard counter, but I think like as you said, like out mind, like getting into people their mind, and then winning by that. But I think not many people can do that.
Okay, I have so many follow-up questions. I feel like we could talk about this for just an entire video, but I'll have to move on because okay. God knows I would do that. Okay, next question.
I have the time, so whatever you.
Well, maybe we'll do a part 2.
Okay.
Question number 3 from Superior Core from Plex Chat. For Surge, if you were trying to create your own unique deck, what would your decks consist of? Like how many spells, tank air units, range units, etc. So do you have like a specific format that you're always going to use when you're creating an off-meta deck, or is it just dependent?
I think it's dependent on the meta. Like, of course, you will always try to, if you make an off-meta deck, you will always try to make your deck good against the meta decks. So it totally depends. So let's say Lockbait is really meta, which right now isn't really the case. You would, for example, put 3 spells. And right now, I would recommend, for example, putting Fireball Zap or like a Princess, which can get value versus 2 Must Heal versus Graveyard, etc. So it totally depends on the current meta. But I would not, or I would, for example, recommend people to not have 4 spells in their decks, because it would give an awkward cycle. And some cards are just not good. For example, let's say the Dark Prince. I would never put a Dark Prince in my deck, even though it's really off meta. I just think it won't work.
What about Ice Wiz? Are you in the camp that Ice Wiz needs a buff, or are you happy with him the way he is?
Yeah, I definitely think he needs a buff, where like a slow damage DPS buff, where it can one-shot bats and skeletons.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, that's a fair answer. Question number 4 from user 3210XD from Plex Chat. Ask about the skill gap between teammates in 2v2 and how it could be prevented. So the obvious answer is going to be just allow you to play with your friends or your clanmates. How do you feel about these 2v2 challenges, especially ones that you have to pay gems for, and then you're matched with somebody random who could leave the match halfway through or could just stink?
Yeah, true. So yeah, I definitely think either picking friends, but I would not say that's always fair. Maybe something with trophy range. So for example, I'm around 4K trophies, then I will not match with someone at 2K trophies, which doesn't know much about the game or isn't just at my level yet. If you're at 4K, I would like to see something like that, so that they watch, or if they look at your trophies and then around your trophy range.
Sure, I actually agree with you there. I think that trophies doesn't necessarily indicate skill 100% of the time, but at the same time, you're generally safer being matched up with and against people in your same trophy range. So I actually really agree with that. I think that's a good point. The next question from Ale/Nina, he says, how would you use the cannon card and in which decks? Do you think it's a good card?
I think it's a good card, but I would compare the card with like the bowler. I think you could see it in 1 or 2 meta decks, but it's not really a card which you would put in every deck like the Night Witch did. So I definitely like the card, and how I would use it, I would probably use it. I actually tested it. I got 11 wins today with a giant cannon card deck. So I would use it behind the tank because I think it's pretty good behind the tank. It's quite hard to kill because it's quite tanky. So I definitely see it work with like a Golem deck, maybe a giant deck. I tested it with a giant deck, got 11 wins. So yeah, definitely with a tank deck.
That's solid. That's a good take on the card. I think that maybe I was a little bit too harsh on it. I said in my video yesterday that I didn't think it was a great card. I think it's not as bad as Sparky, but it's another, if you wanted to be mean, you could call it another trash can on wheels. but you know, it's a good point. You know what I think it is I think that everybody looked at the card at first and they thought it was going to be like a defensive monster because it turns into a cannon, and it just has that defensive card built into it. But I think you're right. I think it's better like offensively, either in a siege deck maybe, like to protect an expo or something, or
Yeah, I
like
actually saw someone using an expo deck indeed, and that worked quite well for him as well indeed. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, maybe I need to get you to share that giant cannon card deck on the channel too coming up.
Sounds good.
So the next question is from Music Master, and he says, "Is such a in such a counter meta, what goes in your mind when deciding your deck's choice?" So let's talk from like a competitive angle here. So when you're going to go out in a competitive event, you recently won ESWC as well. Again, congratulations.
Yeah,
So
thanks.
what goes through your mind when you have deck selection?
So for example, last weekend I had a live event as well, and in the rounds, like you had rounds where you had to win, like you had a group of 8 players, and top 2 would advance. So in a format like that, I would play a really like consistent safe deck. I played Graveyard Control with Executioner Tornado, knowing that if you have a solid defense, it's hard for them to break through. Your offense is really good, so I'm trying to be safe. But later on in the bracket, I, for example, faced, let's say, Soaking, my teammate. I know that he likes the P.E.K.K.A deck. So I try to pick maybe a little bit more risky, but I try to pick a deck which is good versus his decks. Let's say he does counter me, I would always have like more matches because it was a best of 5. But in that case, I would take risk, like trying to counter him.
Okay, so you're starting out a little bit more conservative, and then you're getting a little bit riskier the farther you get in the tournament.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes sense. And what about now you have such a reputation of being like a mind game player where you're always going to have that good counter deck selected. So what do you do? Because all your opponents know that about you. So maybe they try to play one step ahead of you in that chess game, and they go, okay, well, Surge knows I play P.E.K.K.A, so he's probably going to run whatever, guards or, or a Tombstone in his deck, just extra cards to counter the P.E.K.K.A. So I'm going to go non-P.E.K.K.A, and I'm going to go something, like bait or something like that. So how do you kind of deal with, now that you're getting a reputation for being an off-meta and a really a flexible opponent?
I think being that off meta, like I would never counter, like I said as an example the P.E.K.K.A deck, for example, but I know that he, for example, played 3 or 4 decks, so I would pick one deck which is good versus all of them, but not like if he has something else, I would instant lose.
Okay, so you're still playing it yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm not trying to be predictable, I guess.
Okay, I like that. And it reminds me of when you played that mirror deck in CCGS. It didn't necessarily work out for you, but it was a really cool
I actually won that match.
Well, okay, I thought you went 1-1 with it. I thought you had it twice. I could be wrong.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah.
But still,
Nemsensei.
yeah, you won the one that really mattered with it. So yeah, you're right. Okay, next question from Joey. Joey says on Twitter, do you think the state of the game is healthy and or balanced? If not, what should they do to fix that? So that's a giant question from Joey. Do you have some bullet points? Do you like the state of the game right now? And what do you think should be changed?
To be honest, I don't really like the state of the game. Yes and no. Like, yes, because I like it because it's really versatile. A lot of decks work, so I like that. I can use many decks. But no, because as you said, like, or as I said, I mean, as I said, like, you have the heal, which is really strong versus poison decks. And because of the Night Witch being so strong, like, poison is almost needed to run. So it's basically whoever has, like, a good deck, in, for example, a Grand Challenge or whatever, whoever has the better deck, most of the times will win. So I would like to see that change, like the heal spell or the Night Witch as well.
Okay, so and a lot of people ask this, so I guess as a follow-up question, a lot of people asked what would be your best or your top balance change suggestions. So maybe just give like your biggest need for a nerf and your biggest need for a buff in your opinion.
2 for the nerf, the heal spell, and the Night Witch, just because like the Night Witch is basically a mini P.E.K.K.A spawning bats, and then when it dies, it also spawns bats. So it's just insane for 4 Elixir. Like it's I think in every deck. And the heal spell, like it's just too strong. It forces people to run like fireball decks, etc. But with the Night Witch, like if they have fireball versus Night Witch, it's just not good because the Night Witch doesn't die to fireball zap. So it's kind of hard to explain. I'm not sure if you understand me, but like you have to use certain cards to counter one meta card, but then the cards you use to counter that one gets countered by the other meta card. So let's say I use poison to counter the Night Witch. The heal spell counters my poison. So then you have like the rock, paper, scissors situation. I would like to see that changed.
Okay. Yep, that does make sense to me, and I think the viewers can understand where you're coming from there in terms of the hard counter problem. But do you think the heal needs to be nerfed or just kind of reworked? Because I feel like the heal is one of those spells that it's really good in a lot of situations. I mean, it's really good in a couple situations, and it really kind of is, in a lot of other decks.
I think maybe rework it, or I'm not sure if that's a nerf. I think that's a nerf that you put it that it doesn't heal as quick. So let's say you put a poison and a lock. If they heal, they would still die to the poison and lock because the heal doesn't, or it doesn't heal as quick as usual. So you would have to think more about using the heal spell. Also, your placement with, for example, 3 Muskie more behind your tower because you know that the lock won't reach them. And I would like to see something like that.
Yeah, you're one of the only pro players. Another Ash question. Sorry, guys. You're one of the only pro players in the NDA club. Do you? And you're very vocal about when you think something needs to be fixed. I think a lot of people appreciate that about you. Do you feel that pros? I think recently Backstab put out a tweet saying that he thinks that pros, and Ahsoka said this as well, that pros should have a say in balance changes. Not decide, but they should have some influence with the team because they play the game the most and they know it at the most competitive level. Do you agree with that, or do you think that the team should stay totally separate from the pros?
I think definitely agree, and I know that Supercell focuses a lot about casual players because I remember the Royal Giant nerf. They nerfed it because a lot of casual players complained about it, when I thought that it was really good in competitive play. So maybe even like separate the cards. Like let's say you just totally ban the heal spell from competitive play or something like that. Or if they don't want to do that, yes, involve pro players in like making decisions as well.
Okay, it's a fair point. Moving on. Next question from Greasy Burglar on Twitter. He says, "What is better, mastering one deck and learning everything about it, or mastering a few decks? Essentially, just playing one deck until you know every little nook and cranny, or working on a few decks and not being that proficient?"
I would say working on multiple decks, just because like otherwise you can get hard countered. I think there is not one deck which can beat like every deck, even though you mastered it like super well. I think you will always be able to counter one deck. So I would suggest to play multiple decks. I also think that's more fun. Like if you, for example, play Grand Challenges, I use multiple decks to play Grand Challenges just because otherwise I would get bored. And I think for other players that would be the same. Like if you would play the same deck over and over.
Okay. The King YouTube on Twitter asks, "How can someone get better at not wasting elixir on defense during a battle? You don't want to take damage, but you have to take some." And this is a question that I want to ask too, because I think I'm pretty bad. I think this is one of the weak spots in my own game. I think it's probably one of the weak spots in a lot of players' games. They know not to wait and overcommit on offense, but what about overcommitting on defense? How can you get better at that?
That's a really good question. I'm thinking about how I learned it myself, and I think for myself it's just experience in defense, and knowing when it's a good moment that you should not overspend, so you would get the advantage, or that you not overspend, that you would fall down too much, like in Elixir. So I would say just like try to look at like the how do you say it, the traits, I guess. Look at the traits if you know that you're up on Elixir or down a lot, and take advantage. Like it's okay to take like 300 400 damage if you would get like 3 or 4 elixir more. I think in certain situations you just basically experience. I'm not sure if I'm explaining it well, sorry if I'm not, but
yeah, you are. So like in your average match, do you think that there's a point in the match where sometimes you'll say, okay, this guy overcommitted several times, on offense, maybe just very small overcommitments by your opponent, and then do you look at it as you're cashing in on that at one point where you're just going to take a little bit extra damage, but you're going to have a huge elixir lead and like unload on him? Is that kind of how it works with you?
Yeah, exactly. Like in the situation you're giving, I would, for example, if I would, for example, be playing Graveyard and I don't want to overspend, but I saw that he just overspent, I would take a little bit of damage
Mhm.
and then go really hard with like Graveyard and Poison, sort of overcommitting. But I know that after me overcommitting, we are kind of equal. But that push would deal a lot of damage because he won't have that much Elixir. So yeah, indeed.
I think that's a really good point. Like there's times when overcommitting is actually a good thing, you know. And maybe
Yeah.
he has a counter, who knows? But still, it's worth it because you have that advantage, you know.
Exactly.
All right, and the last question is going to be from the guy who suggested this, again, Omani Gamer on Twitter. He says, I am an average player. Do you recommend me try to win grand challenges or try to play grand challenges, excuse me, or no? By the way, I usually win classic challenges.
I mean, effort for average player, but I think for every player, grand challenges, you can learn a lot. Just because, of course, you will always also play like average players, but sometimes you will play really good players. And I think like when the 15K tournaments, going back like 1 year, but for example, me, I was really bad back then. And just by watching or playing against professional players, or not professional, just like good players, I guess, you can learn a lot from that. Like you would see how they not overcommit in certain situations, or you would see like combinations. Maybe you could even find a new deck or anything. So I would definitely recommend playing grand challenges.
Okay, that's solid advice, and I think that that's a good point too, because sometimes I advise people to just grind out classic challenges, especially if they're free to play. But you know, that's a really good point. Is when you play someone really good, and you can tell just by clicking on the person's profile who you just played. If they're really good with a ton of cards won or a really high personal best, maybe you want to go and rewatch that match, even if you won, just to see what they did. You know.
Exactly. And as I said, like maybe you have an interesting deck. You need 1 or 2 more decks, or you're bored of the deck you're currently playing. Just try it out. Maybe in a classic challenge that deck, which you copied. But I think that could be fun and helpful as well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I just wanted to thank all the people out there who submitted questions. I'm sorry so many of them weren't asked on this video. If you guys like this series, let me know. We'll do much more of them because these are really one of my favorite type of videos to do. And I want to give a huge shout out, obviously, to Surgical Goblin for coming on the channel. Surge, do you have any big plans, any interesting videos coming up on your YouTube channel?
Yes, actually, I'm about to hit 200,000 subscribers. So I will do a Surgical Cup, where I will be doing an in-game tournament qualifier for a bracket. And then the bracket, the winner will get $250 Supercell gift card. Second place, $200, etc., etc. But I will be making a video about that soon.
Awesome, man. Dude, you have grown so fast. You're going to be passing me in like another 10 days, I think. But it's so well-deserved, man. So congratulations.
Thanks.
Looking forward to that tournament. It should be a lot of fun. Maybe, who knows? Maybe I'll play in it. But thanks again for coming on, man.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thanks.
No problem. So guys, that is going to do it for today's video. Huge shout out to Bren Chong, my YouTube sponsor. Make sure you check him out. His information is in the description below. Also, 1 day left on my Clash Royale action figure giveaway. I'll put a link to that giveaway in the description as well. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, take care, guys.